Welcome everybody to Facilitating in Tough Times. I wish I had more than an hour to do this presentation because I took a week of facilitation practices, and I would love to say that I couldn't cut anything out because every part of it was a very growing experience for me. But I want to just bring up the model today in order to kind of talk about the hidden skill of facilitation and how much we're going to need to embrace it with the return to work that we're having. But before I start that, I just want everybody to type in the chat window what you think some of the biggest challenges or obstacles that people will face, whether it's you personally or people going back to work as they go back to the office. And I know between last week and this week, there have been, I want to say, at least a 50 to 60% increase of people returning back to their offices. So if you would just type in the chat area, I would love to see what some people think are going to be some of the biggest problems. Or some, if you already had them, what are they? Okay, so there's safety and confidence in the future. Anyone else? I know my husband is at a major university, and then I'm also affiliated with ASU, and there's the anxiety of getting back to work. Actually, out here, they're also having difficulty getting people to return because they're making more money being furloughed, being laid off because of all the supplements from the government. And they actually wrote in and said, hey, can you just leave me laid off for another 2 weeks? I could make it to the end of July and make more money. So there's that side of it. The social distancing in the new environment is another one when we return into the work area. And I think there's some awkwardness. I know myself, at the end of last month, I went back to ASU and I gave a workshop for a group of people. And it was the first time in 5 months I had been facilitating a group of people. And even though it was like, yeah, I'm there and it's live, we all had to wear masks. I had 2 people that had to be zoomed in because they had been exposed to somebody with COVID, so they didn't want to show up. And a lecture hall that normally had 60 people in it only had 10 spread out around the room. And so it still wasn't what I would consider normal, like not what we remember things to be. So thinking about this particular presentation and what did I want to get to, I want to just quickly kind of note some of the struggles that people are facing return to work. But if you're a consultant or you're somebody working with organizations, there are definitely things you want to know of. But I want to deal more, I want to say, with the psychological side of things and bring in the integral model facilitation for ways to help us deal with the many things that we will face as leaders as people are coming back into work. So I want to address what that model can bring out and things that you can do with your team, or if you're a consultant that you can go in and do with another organization. And I think this is a big need, especially going into fall, where more and more groups will be coming back on a limited basis or even being forced back into Zoom. We're starting to get that little bit of disorientation about, oh my gosh, how do we really maintain all of this? So let's liberate ourselves to be better and more successful. Okay. So the world temporarily closed down this past April. And I think it was a state of shock at that point, just like, oh my gosh, did we really just shut down? What is going on? And as we think about the return to work, there's some people that go, oh, this is just like a half marathon. We'll make it through it. We'll be able to get this. We can train. We can make it through this half marathon. And now we kind of look at it and go, no, it's a full marathon. Actually, you know what? It's a triathlon, because we've had the return and now we've kind of had a surge and we're going back. And we're like, so what are we going to do? And yet it's not nice and neat like a triathlon, because a triathlon, we know we're going to go this distance and there's an end point. Then we're going to go this other distance with something else and its end point. And we have none of that. So I will equate it to Tough Mudder. It's a free-for-all. We have to be strong. We have to be resilient. It's going to be dirty. It's going to be messy. And we all need to embrace each other, even though we can't touch and make contact. to help get through this. And so we can't quit, we can't stop. Obviously, things are going to keep coming at us, and what do we do to face the new challenges? So on the one side, and this is, I want to say, the side that most businesses are getting the information and they're doing what they need to do. And this has to do with the protocols, procedures, and policies. And in the bottom corner, I have a guidance and prep for workforce for COVID, which is done by OSHA. And this is what is, I want to say, standard protocol. It's thrown out to you. Anybody can get access to this information. It's basically the do's and don'ts. So how do we stay safe? How do we social distance? How do we set up gatherings? The protocols are, 6 feet. We have to have better ventilation. We should all be wearing masks. From procedures in terms of the front line, the people up front, we've put up screens, dealing with people that have been furloughed. How do we put them off? How do we bring them back? How do we keep that distance? And even policies now in terms of how are we going to deal with sick leave? Some groups have had even more, like if you come down with corona, yep, no problem. You stay at home. We'll give you 14 days and we'll impact things. Or dealing with travel. Going back to ASU, this was so crazy. They have a shutdown, like nobody's allowed to travel until 2001, like end of first quarter of 2001, right? Or 2021, I mean. And here I am, I had to travel back for my mom, so I happened to be in town. Well, because I was in town, I could run the workshop, but they wouldn't fly me out to run the workshop. So there's a bunch of policies and things. So obviously everything is to reduce exposure between the protocols, the procedures, and the policies. And there's a lot out there. Most universities are talking to other universities. Businesses are talking to other businesses, like the restaurants, what's working, what's not, how do we keep safe? But the reality is that change is equating to physical changes. And I thought this was a great picture because I know a lot of restaurants are like, we have to keep the 6-foot rule. So we're putting dummies into place saying, here's where you can sit and here's where you can't sit. And I don't know if anybody has went back to a restaurant. I've got some in town. We're allowed to sit outside now. Not too many restaurants have the sit in. And I went to one last night, went in the room, and there's this big room, which would normally sit 40 people. And there were 2 couples in it. Like, that was it. So definitely physical changes. There's obviously administrative changes of how we can go about doing it. But I think the one that's most important for, I want to say, the team of people that get on that are consultants that have worked with either the behavior, the motivation, the different sides of it, is some of the psychological fears. And I don't know that these are being addressed as greatly as the policies and procedures, because that's easy. We can jump in and we can set a policy and say, here's how we keep safe. But we also need to pay attention to the psychological side and safeties that are there. And so I turned to facilitation tools and why facilitator, what facilitation has to do with is it's kind of, I want to say, the technology of collaboration. It's understanding us as humans and how do we create better connection and efforts so that the synergies of all the people in the group are greater than individual efforts. And I taught group dynamics for many, many years at ASU, and I just find it fascinating that in most cases, we don't reach this high synergy level. All it takes is one toxic person, one drama person, or somebody who doesn't want to obey the rules to cause havoc for that team to come back to its full capacity. And so you look at leaders today and they're like, oh my God, I've never dealt with anything like this before. What do I do? How do I do it? And so facilitation techniques are literally tools and toolboxes that you can pull out at any time to try to think about what do I need to do to bring this team of people back together so that the synergies are going to be more than the individual parts. And in terms of objectives of facilitation is to increase the engagement by reducing fear. And fear factor is a big one today, and increase satisfaction. So good facilitation is a catalyst for better learning, engagement, and results, especially in this return to work time. So the skill in this in terms of helping groups accomplish the efficiency and safety without fear is again a skill set. And when you start to learn, and I'm going to show a model in just a second, the collective of the mental, emotional experience, even the spiritual power of a group and what they bring together, whether they're in person or even during Zoom meetings, is going to help you as a leader understand what can I do? What can I do to make things better? So couple keys in terms of research. There's been huge studies done on this. High performing teams, and this is like a group coming back to work as a team, okay? The ratio of positive to negative is 6-to-1. And I think this is the one that is really threatened right now through this coronavirus, because people have a tendency to go down the negative rabbit hole, thinking about the fear of coming to work, contact, who's sick, who's not sick. Oh my gosh, how has this impacted our ability to whatever? So this is one to really pay attention to. What can we do to create more positivity? And there's one section we'll cover this. The other thing is inquiry versus advocacy, that instead of like being a person that says, hey, this is what we're going to do, to also inquire and pull out of people, what should we do? Because I know it's like, as a leader, sometimes we feel like I got to have all the answers and I need to dictate to others. And yet a really good leader is also pulling the best of the information out of others. It might be the same as what you want. It might be slightly different, but it's that being able to create the inquiry instead of just telling. The other part is self versus others in terms of balance, where somebody brings in concerns about the self, but then is also concerned about others. And it's a 1-to-1 ratio on both of those. So it's important to note, we got to watch the positivity. We need to, as much as we're trying to tell people what to do, when we go into tell mode, we create more fear, right? And self versus other focus. And especially in this corona state, like wearing masks, we don't wear masks to protect ourselves, we wear masks to protect others. And so it's that, how do we create that awareness between the self and the other in this as well? So when we look at facilitators, what do facilitators do versus don't do? We don't promote our own ideas, opinion. We don't make group decisions. And so as leaders are bringing people back, and we do have to have parameters of certain things that we do, we don't want to become dictators in it, because as soon as we do that, the team can lose trust. They can lose trust for each other, or we can create codependency that, oh my God, they rely on me for everything, which we don't want as a leader, because we already have enough on our plate. We don't want to play favorites, especially with everything going on right now with the impact of racial discrimination and gender discrimination that's been brought to a new height. As a leader, we need to make sure that people are staying focused, that they don't drift off course, that we don't have some people that are dominating, I want to say, the discussion or the time of what happens. And to also ensure that people are respecting each other versus disrespecting. So a facilitator doesn't want to disrespect, they want to set the standards for respect. And so how do we do that? This is called the integral model of facilitation. It's based on Ken Wilber's model. I was introduced it by the Journey of Collaboration, which you can see in the bottom corner. And so it's looking at what is happening when we bring a group of people together. And on one side, you'll see there's collective and individual. So there's the individual part of it, and there's the team part of it. And there's the interior of, in terms of what I'm thinking, and the exterior of what's going on outside. So when we look at that, that's the I. The individual interior's I. It's what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what emotions am I bringing into it? As a leader, what is my something that I'm going to be bringing into this team experience? Then there's kind of looking at the exterior, or the something that's got to happen, and the task orientation. But then we look at the collective on the interior. Now it's our culture as a group. What do we stand for? What are we going to do? And then the exterior is looking at kind of social and systemic phenomena. So this is like the straight model. When we apply it now, we'll note the self and the task, the thing that I have to accomplish, okay? And each person of the team has a self and a task accomplishment. So it's not just me as the leader, but everybody has that. And then you have the culture in terms of what people think and feel and how they do it. And there's going to be a huge culture shift from whatever we had before to the present. And then there's the systems and phenomena. Obviously, as we address, there's certain things for COVID that are going to be in place that we really can't do anything about. But then there's also the way that we address those things. So if we look at this model, it creates the lens and helps us focus on specific things. And from each of these quadrants, there are things that we can do to help people and the team improve performance and increase psychological safety. So on the one side, if things are going really well in the individual interior, we have satisfaction. If things are going really well on the task side, we can see results happen. From the culture side, if things are going really well, we're going to have engagement. And from a process side, well, we'll start to understand what the new processes are and the things that will bring out better results. So 4 keys in it again are the self side. What values, beliefs, and intentions do I bring to the table? What values, beliefs, intentions do others bring to the table? And I know the last time I was on and talked, I kind of talked about DISC with COVID. This is a great one to run a DISC stuff with the group just to get people communicating, or to run passions just to get people communicating again about what do I value, who am I, what are my boundaries, how do I like to be talked to? And it reacquaints people to those things. Obviously, the task is the purpose and results. And there's been shifts and dynamics in this in terms of, you think about restaurants. It used to be, how many people are we going to get in and serve? And now it's like, oh gosh, how can we get more people in an online type system to order? How do we market so that we can get more people to do pickup or delivery? Because they've had to change what's the end result that we need to have happen. And so that's created shifts even in people's jobs in terms of what was their focus before and what's their focus now. In terms of culture, what's the vision that the team has? And I've been through a couple of vision settings now for teams, because the vision for the future a year and 2 years out has shifted from what it was in December or at the beginning of this year, January. And I know a lot of people jumped in and said, okay, this year we're going to accomplish in January. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, what are we going to do now? So what are those things, and how do we revisit that and the team values and set those up? And how do we continue to build trust and relationships and even networking across things, because we're limited to emails, phone, Zoom, versus that, hey, I just happened to be in the building and so-and-so was there and we connected. We're not getting those kind of off-speed connections that we used to before. And so how do we help create those as a part of the system to compensate? So the first thing I want to start off with us, it's like sometimes we look at this and everybody thinks of the things that we need to change in the world and we need to change outside of ourselves. And yet the reality is, what are we doing to prepare ourselves to return? And I know I went through a big thought process myself of what am I going to do with this group of people in a room? Because I haven't been in a room with a lot of people, and a lot of people are dealing with lots of things. So for myself, my awareness, my presence of things is to just center myself and become aware. What am I bringing to the team? What are those things that I have that I can contribute? How do I feel about return to work? Where are my anxieties? For me, it was, here I am, I'm returning to work. I went and got tested for COVID, came out negative, don't have it. But at the same token, I'm now exposing myself to people, and I had to think about my mom, who has the potential of becoming infected. Do I feel safe about even returning to the work scenario and then going and being with my mom? So I felt pretty comfortable. I knew that they were following some good standards. I knew I was okay. I wasn't going to infect the team or the people that were there, and practice good distancing. So far, I've been past 14 days, no issues, okay? So I'll have to be aware of what fears I may have, because I can project them on others. Or if I haven't addressed my own, I can project them. So awareness is really huge. And I love this. It shows an elephant balancing on a ball. When I'm centered and where I need to be, that's the best group or the best thing I can bring to others. And, I've been watching, a couple shows, more TV than I normally watch, but there's a couple good ones. And there's a character in the show that I just love. And she always is just so balanced and present. Now, might not be a realistic one in terms of everything going on, but she always has a way to just try to pay attention to what's going on with the person coming in for 6 to 7 seconds, so that she can bring something to the person that's there. And it was interesting in the last show because something really distracted her and threw her off center, if you will. And so people were coming and she was so distracted that she didn't have that ability to be present. And so, again, where are we? What is it that we're bringing in? What throws us off? That's the important part to think about. What are our triggers? So what is it that makes us feel the loss of control, that we feel like we didn't have to jump in and control? What can sidetrack us and send our brain off into something else? And one thing I want to think about there is even defensiveness. Like somebody comes in and starts telling you something. Do you all of a sudden feel yourself being like, I have to defend myself and what I did or why I did it? It sidetracks us from what being, again, present with the people that are there. So biggest thing is just to be aware of yourself. Again, understanding what triggers you might have right now and what can, I want to say, create that destructive pattern that removes you from being present or creates a communication situation with someone else that isn't getting us to that positive outcome. So what do we do about the culture? So how do we prepare a team? So looking at theirs. One thing, and I brought this up last time, is just really quickly to let people know that they're human. They're human like I'm human. And that as you coming back to work, that people are going to experience this full gamut of grief. And you don't even have to present it as grief, but that as we go forward, we're going to have moments of, God, things just aren't the way they used to be. Why can't they go back there? If only, if that or the other, just pay attention to people where they're at. Depression, like not clinical, but where people feel hopeless or that they're just struggling, like, oh my God, is this ever going to come to an end? Are there comments being made like that? Versus moving into an acceptance of reality, one looking at adjustments and new routine and how do we get there. So as a leader, we really need to focus on what we can do to help them gain confidence, help them to establish new routines, orders, and adjustments, and help them the best way to accept reality. And so it's just look at this and note that it's going to look like this. There's going to be days we get people over here and they're going to accept it. And there's going to be days that we hit the wall and people go on the other side, and know that that's okay. So one of the big ones is to set ground rules and permission slips. And so this is, I want to say different people call it different things, but it's bringing the team together and say, how do we want to communicate now? What is it that's important for us to do? So on this one, for example, there's listen to understand, let people finish thoughts, share airtime, encourage everyone to participate. So just an example of some of the things that are there. So this participation agreement is something that needs to be developed by the group. Don't go in with a set thing. This is something they need to do. They need to talk about things in terms of observable actions, things that they can tell that somebody will or will not do. It needs to be a document that you can send around or display. Like if it's in a room, I usually put it up on a wall. And because I've been ongoing, so I've had like 3 workshops in a row with the group, I bring this back and go, okay, last time we were together, these were the things that were important. Is there anything that needs to change? Does something happen between the last time we met? Do we need to add to this? Do we need to take away from it? So that it is a living document and not just this thing on the wall that people are eating. And that way you're keeping in touch too with any, I want to say, fear factors, changes, something that might be happening around, so that they can continue to go, yeah, this is what's important today, and get everybody to agree to follow it. And I think that's the biggest part of this. So a couple other examples of things is time schedules. Like if you're doing a Zoom meeting, how do you be on time? How do you end on time? That some groups say, hey, we're going to make a decision each time and we want it by consensus, or it's okay if only 2 to 3 have it. So what are some of those things? Cherishing diverse ideas, having one conversation at a time. Again, let the groups come up with it. These are just suggestions and ideas, but it's important for them to come out with it. And I brought this one in. It's a roadmap of trust. I got it from my work from Judith Glazier in conversational intelligence. And I just thought it was a great way to come back in. I'm also a big fan of Brene Brown, but this was just a different one to say, here's some things that we can bring to the table. We're bringing teams back in and say, this is our roadmap to increasing our performance. It's our roadmap to increase connection between us. So in the T stands for transparency. And in the transparency, we have to address threats and fears. And there's 2 major models. There's the safety model and there's the SCARF model by David Rock. And I got to tell you, it's based on the same research. So I just put up here. So for David Rock's, his is status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, fairness, right? So that's the SCARF. Okay. Safety model is another one based on the same thing. So these all mean the same kind of stuff. It has that same certainty and security. We need consistency, commitment, and that things are going to be predictable. We like to have that. And there's a lot of unpredictability. So the more we can address that and bring some predictability in, the better. Autonomy. We need to feel that we have control of our own environments and choices. And to some degree we do, and some we don't on this one. So address it, bring it up, and let it out. You know, what happens if you got somebody that doesn't want to comply about wearing a mask? Well, if it's a policy deal in your group, like the schools, it's required, ASU, no question, you got to have it. And there's even now setup of, if you don't want to wear a mask, here's what's going to happen. You don't want to comply to the new rules, here's what's going to happen, so that they know that there's new rules, you have to. Fairness. We need to exchange experience and feel that everybody's being treated fairly and that things are happening fairly. This is important to keep the transparency open, so if for some reason somebody doesn't feel it's fair, that they feel comfortable expressing that to you. That's the huge part. Esteem and status. Our needs, we compare ourselves to others a lot, and we want to make sure that we're seen in high regard. And so this is really important, because we don't have the face-to-face sometimes, is to still reach out and say, hey, you know, this is what so-and-so has done for the team, like to recognize somebody in front of the team, and to make sure that you're still connecting as a leader to each of the individual people to go, here's what I value about you, here's what your work has done, and if they've sent something to you, that you respond to it, to acknowledge that they got it in and that you've appreciated that. Now, in this one model, they call it trust, but it's really relatedness, and it's our need to belong and to feel protected, that we can be connected with other people like us. And then we also bring ourselves to it again, our own bias, our own influence, our own context. And right now, everybody is dealing with COVID different because our families are dealing with the different. Some people have homeschooling going on. Some people have older parents they're dealing with. And so we have to bring all those factors. But transparency is huge. How do we keep that open? Relationship. And this is that we need to take time to really listen to connect with them, to hear them. And sometimes we go, God, I just don't have time to listen to everybody's story. It's okay to frame and say, hey, I really want to hear what's going on. Give me just a short synopsis of that. Give me your greatest issues, and frame in how much time you have to listen, so that people learn how to get to the point. The big thing is that you postpone judgment, okay? That we don't judge people because they're not dealing with their situation the same way that we would. Understanding, and this is, again, trying to listen to understand what the other person's really saying. And sometimes it's the understanding that know that they may be saying something on top, but there's more there. And so that we ask questions that we don't have answers to. And this is that, you know, when my daughter used to come home from school, if I just go, hey, how was school? She can answer, fine. Like, that's it, like, end of question. But if I answer a thing like, so what's the greatest challenge that you've got Monday now that you've been to school? What do you have to get done before the end of the week? Now I'm asking something that's probing. She's got to give a deeper answer to, and I'm going to get some more information. And then the other part too is to listen to understand. We need to understand that right now there's two major emotions we express. We either go to anger and frustration. So we feel that, like, expressed anger, or someone can go into more of the sorrow and hurt side. And those are two acceptable fronts, especially for a man. Like, they tend to move more to anger, although a high D female like myself can go to anger. Or we can also go to the other side of, it's okay to express that I'm sad. Like, I read an article that says, why do I cry when I'm angry? But underneath the anger and the fear are actually another set of emotions and feelings that are caused by something. And what we have to do as leaders is listen to understand and ask the questions to get to that root cause. So even though we see something and we hear what they say, there's more there, and we almost have to become a little bit more of the psychologist, if you will, to get people to dig a little deeper themselves in terms of what's going on, to understand. Then shared success. We need to listen to co-create and to create opportunities for people to connect. And when they do, we need to share that success and say, wow, you know, despite this is how we came together, because that releases endorphins when we've been able to be successful. And the last one is test assumptions. And she used to have the tool of what she called double clicking. So like on a website, you see something, you click on it, and you go further. And so it's, again, listening to close gaps in reality. So we may have said something and they repeat it back to us, was like, wow, there was a gap there. How did you take it that way? Why did you take it that way? In order to close what we're thinking, why we're thinking it, or even timelines of when something should be done. It's like, okay, well, I really need that. That's urgent. And the other person's thinking, oh, urgent, I'll get it to them by Friday. And you're thinking urgent, no, I need it by tomorrow. So we need to close those reality gaps and test assumptions. So again, that's trust. Those are things that we can do to help build the better culture between setting the permission slips and even getting people to talk about this issue of trust. So how do we go in then and get more purpose and outcome for our return is the second part. And I think this is one where we need to help people with their stories. We need to reduce the stinking thinking, if you will, and to be aware of what is the talk at the water hole, or what's the talk behind the scenes that people are talking about that's really strange and weird. And how can we create spins on that for more positive outcomes? So again, that ratio of 6 to 1. We need to be aware that it's going on, but then how do we do it? So again, like we talked about, listening deeply, asking questions, uniting common core, go back to values, ask them, what's most important to them, and setting those common ground will help bring the team back around to how what they're doing is doing it. And I want to say to act boldly, but move people into action and accountability so that people have that checkpoint, like they know they're doing something and they have to have it done by a certain time, and I'm going to get it in, and then there's that accountability and follow up. So these are things that have been promoted so far out on the internet as being really important, but you need to be aware of what stories they're creating, again, so that you can listen into their story and help them redesign and to be positive and to have more of an action outcome. Because a lot of times people will complain about things, but they don't think about, well, I'm complaining about this, but what would I rather have? What's the outcome I'm looking for? And so that's that connection in. You might go, okay, wow, it sounds like you're really upset with X, Y, and Z. What would you rather see? And what can you do as an individual in this team to contribute, to act boldly, to bring about that greater something? And so get them to rewrite the story so that they're looking at the positive outcome. And I bring this back in. This is what's called the ladder conclusions. I kind of talked about it last time. Is we have our biological reactions, we have our feelings, we have thoughts, and we jump to conclusions. And so this is that part to find and see what is the something you hear, which is usually the conclusion. And so how do we back them down? We want to back them down and say, well, how did you get to that conclusion? What was it that made you think that way? What was it that you were thinking? What was it you were feeling? And to know you have your own responses. So you can share yours, because sometimes that will help them reframe their story to give a different shared pool of meaning. Go, well, gosh, I didn't see it like that. But then to make sure that you ask, what is their path? What did they see? What did they hear? How did they feel about it? What story did they create? And what actions are they showing? And so it's, moving from that pit of despair into that area that we can do something about. Okay, and I know I'm rushing through some of this, so hopefully we get to question and answer, you can ask more. What can we do to ensure best process are used, or what can we do to produce better outcomes? And I want to introduce people who I haven't before to Liberating Structures. And this is the app. This is a picture on the phone. So if you go to wherever, what app you have, App Store for your phone, you can literally look up Liberating Structures, or you can look Liberating Structures online and you can go to the website. And this is literally a toolbox of 40 plus processes, things that you can take the team through to produce certain outcomes. And it's absolutely free. So this is your freebie for the day, okay? So when you look again at the 4 areas of facilitation, you've got the self side, values, beliefs, intentions. You've got tasks. What are purpose, results? What are we here to accomplish? What is it that I need to do? And I think this is where you need to connect people again and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And then they connect to somebody else and say, this is what I'm doing. To take time to look at the culture. And this might not all happen in one meeting. We might have one meeting that just addresses the top. Then you have another one that addresses the culture. And then you get into the system process strategies, which this facilitation stuff can help with. And so this is just an example of some of them that are there. So we have to have the individual, we have to increase the vulnerability, integrity, and presence of people. And there's activities called Know Yourself or Facilitate Yourself. And these, again, create some introspection for a person to answer some questions about themselves, or what do I do if I feel like I'm getting out of control? How do I bring myself back in? And it's literally helping people create the emotional intelligence tool that they will use for themselves when they feel like they're falling off a deep end somewhere. How to embrace the unexpected. Again, if these with stars are actually in there, and they're things that you can look up, and it will tell you, here's what the tool is, here's how long it takes, this is what you need to give to the people, and here's what the outcome is. And so they're wonderful, but there's like 3 that you could use specifically to bring to the next meeting you're at. On the exterior, we have to create accountability, possibility, and service. And so these are looking at our own agendas, or how to craft a meeting, or looking at solutions, so that when we bring something to the table and somebody suggests things, how do we bring each meeting to a close so that there's somebody or everybody held accountable for something that's going to be done next time. And so again, these are just examples of things. In terms of culture, they have build the community, flex perspective, listening empathically, positive gossip. Positive gossip is such a great one to run for culture. And I have done this in dynamics. You can do it on a Zoom, because you can push people out into dual chats where they just get to talk to 2 people, pull them back in, send them back out with 2 more people. And it's a way to create positivity. When we start talking positive, you can literally change the whole atmosphere in a room. You can change the atmosphere in an office. And with it, it's a way to say, hey, this is what was really cool that happened this last week. Or you can even do, hey, this is what I appreciate about you on the team or last team. So it's got a couple different versions you can look at. But it's things that you can do to create a spin to bring in that positivity in the culture. And then in terms of processing, there's one that's called impromptu networking. Little bit more difficult to do via a Zoom, but this is one that I've done in group sessions where you either pick a topic or something that somebody wants to solve, and they get to go around and network and find other people that are doing what they're doing. And so this might even be one to challenge people with and say, okay, what is one thing that you want to do different than you did before? And I want you to go out and meet 3 people, either like at ASU, which is very large, or another company. I want you to go make connections with people you don't normally connect to and find out what you can find out about this. Because we'll have our network we know, but that one just forces you out to make you connect with other people. 1, 2, 4 all is another great one. Usually it's like I come up with the idea of whatever, share it with one other person, share it with 4 people, and then you bring that to the group. And so it's a wonderful thing to bring out. Then this one down here is called Trioka Consulting. If you get to bring people back, this is a good one for giving people advice. So maybe you have a topic of how can I become more efficient at work right now? And the person shares what their struggles are, and 2 people listen. And then the person who was sharing turns around and they literally like can cup their hands to their ears. So you can do it with social distancing. And the other 2 people talk about that person's problems like they're a consultant. There are 2 consultants talking. So they're not talking at the person, they're talking amongst themselves of how they would solve that problem. And the person listening then can pick up on what they want. And it is absolutely fascinating that at the end of meetings, sometimes if I go, what was the greatest thing today? They will come back and say this was the greatest time for them, because they got some really, really practical solutions to what they needed to do. So again, here is facilitation tools. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have training. As long as you can read and see what's there. I haven't had anybody yet that hasn't been able to conduct these. Maybe the first time's a little awkward, but it just flows. And it's a way, again, to go in and try something new when you're going back with teams. Because I think the biggest thing, too, in the return to work, besides the fact that you have all the, I want to say, coronavirus protocols you have to follow, is that we have to take that extra effort to make sure that we're connecting to the people themselves, trying to connect to what they are doing similar, different to their job before they left, and how they are connecting together as teams so that they feel like there's, I want to say, that connectivity like they had before, but that there's some purpose and they, have gone back to set their own vision, mission, that type of stuff. So again, these are just examples. This is crowdsourcing, where you can pull in a lot of ideas very quickly. the 124 All that I mentioned, and these are just examples. If you want to learn more about the journey of facilitation themselves, I know I can give courses on it, but I also like to get people back to the journey of facilitation themselves. They have been running monthly sessions where you can join in and just listen to some best practices. And they were also still conducting courses in an online environment. So I'll just share that. And if you go to them and you're from here, just tell them Pam recommended. Love both of them. They'll be like, cool, glad to know she's doing that.